Welcome to Journals Roundtable. I'm Phil Beckman. Today we're joined by Linda Stein, news editor with the Delaware Valley Journal, John Cole, reporter with the Pennsylvania Capital Star, and Christen Smith, regional editor for the Center Square. Christen, you wrote that the Trump administration froze $175 million in federal funds for the University of Pennsylvania on Wednesday. Why?
He has done this as answer to his campaign promise that he would take action against universities that had athletic policies that allowed transgender athletes to participate. And the University of Pennsylvania was very at the forefront of this debate back in 2022 when Leah Thomas, who was a swimmer at the time and had swam on the men's team for 3 years and then transitioned over to the women's team, won some championships, and it became a very public face of this issue. So Trump's administration came out yesterday and said that they would be freezing this funding as a result. And they made the comment that it was promises made, promises kept. Now, to be clear, I don't believe that the University of Pennsylvania has any transgender athletes at this time. And in fact, the NCAA estimates that I believe there's less than 10 transgender athletes overall participating out of 500,000 athletes. And so it's really more of a message that he is sending to other universities and institutions that he is going to make good on this promise, that it was not just campaign rhetoric.
How did the university respond?
As of right now, they said that they continue to follow all of NCAA guidance on how to handle this issue, but they have never received any formal official direction from the federal government about how to proceed or about how long the funds will be frozen or what next steps to take.
Were these funds appropriated by Congress?
Yes, I believe so. I can't speak to the exact funding source of it. However, I know that it's not, University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League school. They're not short on money by any means. So it's unclear. I would say it's probably unlikely that they'll have to close doors or anything like that because they will lose this money temporarily. However, as the university said, it's just been an announcement thus far. They have no idea what the stipulations are or how to get the money unfrozen yet.
John,
and it's interesting. It's his own alma mater.
John, you wrote recently about Sunday hunting, which is a big issue. And for many years, there's been an effort to try to repeal the ban on Sunday hunting. What's the latest?
That's correct, Phil. For those who are familiar with the topic of Sunday hunting, it's not exactly new in Pennsylvania. We've been hearing about this. The past few sessions, there have been legislation proposed to essentially repeal Pennsylvania's ban on Sunday hunting. Currently, there are 3 Sundays that are open to hunting, and that's actually somewhat of a relatively recent change. That only happened a few years ago. So again, the new faces right now that are leading the charge are State Senator Dan Laughlin, who has been in the state senate. This is his 3rd term. I shouldn't say he's a new face to it because he's been leading the charge since he was first elected. But a Democrat now on the state house side, Mandy Steele, who represents parts of Allegheny County, she is now in her 2nd term, and she has also introduced similar legislation in the state house. So there are 2 pieces of legislation currently that are going to be in the Game and Fisheries committees in their respective chambers from Senator Laughlin and Representative Steele. Very similar, that they want to repeal against Pennsylvania's Sunday hunting prohibition. And the interesting thing, at least from my story that people read, and also the conversations I had, was that they've been trying to do this for multiple terms, but it does feel as though the authors of this legislation this time actually feel pretty optimistic that this will get across the finish line. Both of them said they hope to have this passed this year. Last year, it did gain some momentum where Representative Steele's legislation actually passed the state house, but I think they ran out of time. I think this time around, since they're introducing it earlier, we don't know the exact timeline of when these will be voted upon in committee at this moment, but they do seem to be optimistic that they think this will get across the finish line. Another difference, I would say, in comparison to previous sessions is that the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau historically was, one of the people who used to oppose the idea of Sunday hunting, but they've recently come out in favor of this legislation because they talked about the issue of crop damage. And they believe that now they're not saying that Sunday hunting is going to necessarily rectify all the issues that farmers are facing with crop damage. But when I spoke to someone with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, they mentioned that they think it's basically another tool in their toolbox. Hopefully, it's something that they can use to potentially combat that. Now, of course, it's worth noting that there are people opposed to it too. Like any matter, one of those big groups that is opposed to it is the Keystone Trails Association. They essentially advocate for hikers in the state, and they talked about, they think that they believe that Sundays, as of now, again, beyond those 3 Sundays of the year that are reserved for hunting, they think it's nice for hikers to go out and enjoy the experience. Essentially, they talk about, they're worried about the safety of the hikers / also just the quiet and calmness of nature. They enjoy with their Sundays without hunting. But I will say that the fascinating thing is, in my interview with the Hikers Association, they also acknowledge that, look, I think the exact word is they're realists, and they realize that there is now bipartisan support, it seems as though, and they do realize this is a possibility this time. And their main concern is if this gets across the finish line, and that remains to be seen, to be clear. They said to the Game Commission, how do you roll it out carefully? Because they want to make sure that those who enjoy hiking in Pennsylvania's woods are also safe and kept in mind in this conversation.
Linda, you've been writing about a pipeline leak. In late January, a leak was discovered with the Twin Oaks pipeline. What's going on there? How much damage has been caused?
Well, it seems like it's gotten, well, let me start at the beginning. The pipeline runs for over 100 miles from Delaware County all the way up to Newark, where it provides jet fuel to the airport up there. And it's pretty old. It's something like 67 years old, and it's developed a leak. They've patched the leak. They've fixed the leak. However, not before jet fuel has contaminated some residents' wells. The residents, the company, which is Energy Transfer Sunoco, has been providing the residents with filters for their wells, and also bottled drinking water if they want it. But of course, the residents are totally freaked out and unhappy with gas in their well water, and hundreds have been coming to meetings, and there's concern that a plume of the leaked fuel has been spreading. And as at least 2 weeks ago, a new house was discovered to have the jet fuel in its well. So it's an ongoing problem, and all the various agencies have jumped in. The DEP, the federal agency that regulates the pipelines, which the name of it is escaping me. But they're the ones that would have to make the call to close the well, which a lot of the residents and politicians are saying, or I'm sorry, close the pipeline, which a lot of the residents and politicians are saying that they want to happen. But meanwhile, they have lowered by 20% the amount of jet fuel that's going through that pipeline, and they're claiming that there's no more leaks, and this has fixed it. So I guess it's an ongoing situation.
What role is the State Attorney General's office playing?
Oh, that's true. The State Attorney General's office has recently said that they are going to investigate themselves because they have control over environmental law. So they could be bringing charges against the pipeline operator if they find fault.
Christen, you've recently been writing about some deleted emails within the Shapiro administration. What emails were deleted and why?
So to start from the beginning, there was a sexual harassment complaint against Mike Verb, who was one of Shapiro's cabinet officials. This stems back to March of 2023. The woman who made that complaint resigned about 5 to 6 weeks after first taking the job because of Verb's comments, as well as some of the hostility that he created because of her complaints that she made to HR and to other agencies. And so There was an investigation, obviously, into these claims about 6 months after they were made. Verb resigned, and then a few weeks after that, it became public knowledge that the state settled the issue for $295,000. So, in a bid to know more about this, a reporter from Broad and Liberty filed a right to know request asking for relevant emails and other documents to the internal investigation and understanding of what happened here. And there were emails from the woman who complained from about the last week of her employment that the right to know request sought to get a hold of. And they were unable to get that. They decided to pursue court action in order to get those emails. And in open court last month, attorneys for the administration said, "Oh, we deleted those emails because they're no longer necessary." The problem there is that there are records retention policies, and that means that the state is supposed to keep employees' emails at a minimum of 3 years, but as long as 8 years. And so this employee only quit working 2 years ago. So there's a clear timeline issue there. And the admission in open court has kind of opened a big can of worms for the administration.
How has the administration responded to this?
There's been a lot of silence beyond the fact that during a press conference right after the news of this broke, a reporter from the Post-Gazette actually asked Shapiro about the story and how he felt about it. He said that he was not aware, he hadn't read any of the reports, but that he felt confident that his staff follows records retention policies.
Now, John, you recently had the opportunity to interview Congressman Glenn Thompson, who represents the 15th District, is a Republican representing the 15th District. What did he tell you about his priorities?
That's correct. So, last week I had the chance to talk to Congressman G.T. Thompson for 20 minutes. So it was a nice long conversation via phone. Congressman Thompson, actually, at this point in time, since Senator Bob Casey lost his bid for re-election, Congressman Thompson is the dean of Pennsylvania's congressional delegation, and he's there longer than any member of the Pennsylvania Senate. And the distinction he has for this current session is that he's the chair of the U.S. House Agriculture Committee. Now, of course, a big position that he chairs a committee, and also that one of the big topics on their plate this year is passing the next iteration of the Farm Bill, which is again a 5-year bill. So again, they're working on that right now. And I had a discussion with him essentially about, what are the priorities in the Farm Bill, and then a bevy of other issues. Again, with now a new administration there with President Donald Trump, Congressman Thompson and President Trump, Congressman Thompson was a supporter of President Trump's. So I believe that, they work rather well together, but there are a bevy of issues facing agriculture that we kind of went on in that conversation. We talked about tariffs. We talked about, immigration. We talked about a wide range of issues. But the fascinating thing is that he believes, and then he told me this months ago when I saw him at the Pennsylvania Farm Show, Brooke Rollins, who is now the Secretary of Agriculture, he told me he thinks she'd be the cabinet member that's closest to President Trump. So as the discussion goes on of the negotiation of this next farm bill, I'm really interested to see how much of the priorities that Congressman Thompson has will get in that final product.
Now, you mentioned the Farm Bill, and one of the things that always comes up with the Farm Bill is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, the SNAP program. What did he say about the status of that?
Great question, Phil. And that was one of the main things I wanted to drive home in our conversation, because there was certainly some chatter, at least online, about there might be some reductions to SNAP in Farm Bill. And he was very clear to me in his first sentence. His response was absolutely no reductions in the nutritional benefits. And I thought the fascinating thing was beyond him committing that in his version of the Farm Bill, there would be no cuts to SNAP. He also said that they would be expanding it to other groups of individuals who currently do not get it. Those recently returning from prison, I believe who were previously incarcerated for felony drug charges is exactly how he put it. He described it as not only the right thing to do, but he believes a righteous thing to do. He thinks if you can help those people just getting out of prison with some food support, maybe that they can help change their life around. And of course, wants them to be productive citizens as opposed to being incarcerated once again. And then the other group of individuals he said would be eligible for SNAP benefits in his version of the Farm Bill would be those, older children with disabilities who, work a certain amount of hours a week, but they want to make sure that's not used against them for their family, so they can also receive SNAP benefits as well. So he was at least clear in our conversation that although there's been talks about cutting SNAP in the Farm Bill, in his proposal, he wants to make sure that it is not cut, and he would like to see it expanded to those two other groups.
Now, you mentioned that you asked him about tariffs. So President Trump has been implementing tariffs on several countries, Canada, Mexico, China. They've retaliated. What did he say about how he thought tariffs would affect Pennsylvania agriculture?
Yeah, tariffs are one of the most interesting parts, I think, with my conversation with Congressman Thompson, was because when I asked, is he concerned about the impact that tariffs can have on the agriculture industry? Now, again, mind you, Congressman Thompson is a supporter of President Trump, and he did say he trusts President Trump to use tariffs kind of as like a negotiating tactic. But at the same time, he admitted, he's like, I'm concerned with tariffs placed on foreign countries on agriculture commodities. He's like, but at the same time, he described himself as being a fan of free and fair trade, not just free trade. So he basically said that some of these retaliatory tariffs he believes he's in favor of, but at the same time, there are tariffs he was concerned about. And he mentioned that there are certain exceptions that he is lobbied for from President Trump in regard to trade with Canada and Mexico. So we'll see again how these reciprocal tariffs play off. I believe it's April 2nd, I think, is when the next round was supposed to go in for Canada and Mexico. So we'll see again how many of those products are agriculture based and how many exemptions do they get? Because I know there were certain exemptions that Congressman Thompson was seeking.
Linda, recently the Pennsylvania Department of State signed a contract to upgrade its statewide uniform registry of electors, or SURE program. What is that program?
Well, the program in its essence makes sure that if you're registered to vote, you're a valid voter. You're not a dead person. you're not somebody who is here illegally, etc. It's like a computerized sort of system that the state runs to make sure that all goes well with elections.
How do election officials use this program?
Well, the counties are the ones that run the election. Each of our 67 counties has a board of elections, and they have a director of elections, and they're the ones that register people to vote. So it goes through the counties, and then the counties in turn check with the SURE system, which is the state system, to make sure that the would-be voter is a valid registration. So, and then they try to prune off people who should not be registered. Say they moved away to Florida, or they have a voter registration in Florida or in Pennsylvania too. They use a system called ERIC, which is and I forget what the acronym is for that, but anyway, that is another system that various states belong to that can cut out these people that have moved and haven't bothered to let the Board of Elections know in Pennsylvania that, yes, we've moved. So
now, there was a previous contract that was signed, but it was canceled in 2023. Why was it canceled?
That I'm not sure about.
How long does this new contract supposed to be implemented? What's the timeline on it?
I believe it was 5 years.
Now, Christen, you've written recently about a paid family leave measure. What would this measure do?
This measure would essentially create a state-run program to offer paid family and medical leave to all workers. Currently, only about 25% of workers in Pennsylvania have access to paid family leave. And notably, elected officials are among that 25%. But there is a growing cohort of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who think that we need to change this, that the state could feasibly put together a program and run it so that the other 75% of workers who have a baby or who have a sick family member or who get injured themselves have the ability to take time off work and not lose pay. Representative Representative Natalie Mihalik talked before the House Labor and Industry Committee earlier this week about why it's so important to have this, and that, old-fashioned thinking, as she put it, about, oh, well, you should have just planned ahead, or you should have gotten a different job so that this wouldn't be an issue. She said that's just not a reality for today's workers, and that we need to move up with the times. Her proposal would basically create a payroll tax deduction of up to 1% in order to fund a state program for this. The problem is that a lot of those who are against the specific proposal feel that it's not that paid leave isn't something they would like to do. It's that they don't trust the state to run a program well enough to do it.
Do other states have these types of paid leave programs?
14 other states, including many of our neighbors, they have these. And Representative Dan Miller, who is another prime sponsor of the bill, he says that if they can figure out how to do it, why can't we? That, in fact, offering paid leave helps the economy. It doesn't hurt it, because you have people who are able to continue working instead of losing their jobs, losing unemployment, having to go back and forth and find new jobs. It's actually adding money to the economy, he says, because it sustains their employment long term. And there are other people who leave employment entirely because they have health issues or family members with health issues that require them to take off a lot of time of work. People don't, or a lot of employers don't want to or can't afford to accommodate that. So Representative Miller's response is that if other states have figured this out and have found a way to do it without impacting their economy in a negative way, Pennsylvania can do it too.
John?
The thing I'm interested, just to add one point on this, Christen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but with Representative Mihalik and you mentioned Representative Miller, that's one Republican and one Democrat. So this is a bipartisan effort. And I think the fascinating thing is with the current margins we have in the state House and state Senate, should it pass the state House, again, I don't know how many Republicans are also on board in addition to Representative Mihalik, but I'd imagine that it could probably pass the House. I kind of wonder where it would go in the Senate when there's a multiple seat majority right there, or maybe they would have similar legislation of their own that they'd introduce that could be comparable, perhaps. The
Senate is definitely a wild card because there is support in the Senate for, child care tax credits and other working family policies. So there is reasonable suspicion that they might be willing to work on this, but you're right that very narrow on the margin in the House makes it seriously likely that if they were to put it to a final vote, that it could advance.
Where's the bill now in the legislative process?
So it just passed out of the House and Labor Industry Committee, so it's going to the floor where it will be up for amendments if there are any, and then a final vote. All of that's unscheduled though, so we don't know when or if that'll happen. They have 2 years to do it, so.
John, you recently wrote a story about the prospect of a couple of hospitals in Delaware County closing. Why would these hospitals close?
Correct. So then it's quite a big story for those who live in Delaware County. Again, that's the 5th biggest county in terms of population in the state. It's a suburb just south of Philadelphia. Crozier announced, a few weeks ago at this point that they were in the process of going to close Crozier, Chester Medical Center, and Taylor Hospital. They talked about, again, finance issues. Having said that, though, there was an agreement struck, I believe it was early last week. There was a big meeting in Harrisburg that included, the state attorney general, Dave Sunday, and the Foundation for Delaware County to announce that essentially the immediate, so they're basically keeping it open just for the short term, but we don't know how much longer that will be. So again, I would describe it best as it's an ongoing situation where we don't exactly know how much longer it would be open, because if the company that owns, the private equity company that owns both those hospitals is Prospect Medical Holdings, should Prospect still announce at some point that those 2 hospitals will close, you're talking about Delaware County, again, a pretty big county, would have only 2 hospitals remaining should those 2 be closed. So it's one of those things that I know a lot of folks in Delaware County are keeping a close eye on, and understandably so. But at least for the interim future, the next few weeks, those 2 hospitals are still staying open. But again, I think it's, to be clear, I don't think there's been a final solution in that ongoing situation.
Linda, what stories will you be looking at over the next week?
Well, this morning we just did a podcast with Attorney General Dave Sunday, so I'll probably write an article off of that podcast. And today I'm working on something regarding President Trump coming to Philadelphia to watch a college wrestling championship tournament. Evidently, President Trump has been a longtime wrestling fan, so anyway, those are a couple things I'm working on.
Christen, what will you be looking at?
The Senate is coming back next week for their first session day since they wrapped budget hearings. The House was in this week. So this will be an interesting time because we're in the relative lull before budget season in June. So it'll be very interesting to see what they start prioritizing in the meantime. So we'll be keeping an eye on that.
John, what will you be looking at?
And so just like Christen mentioning that the House and Senate being in next week, keeping a close eye on what pieces of legislation are going to be advancing. And if you look at the calendar right now, the House, as we're currently talking, has a good amount of committee hearings that will be voted upon against certain bills. We're going to see which will advance next week. And to Linda's point, President Trump, again, being in Philadelphia this weekend will be interesting. It's his first visit, to my understanding, to Pennsylvania since being sworn into a second term. I confirmed with Senator Dave McCormick that he's also going to be at the wrestling championship. So I'm kind of curious to see what other elected officials might be going there, because we've seen this growing intersection of Pennsylvania elected officials going to sporting events. We know Governor Josh Shapiro has been a fan of going to quite a few events as well. So I'll be keeping an eye on that to see who else shows up at that. And then, of course, again, like Christen said, the State House and Senate next week will be the big things I'm following.
Well, our guests on today's Journalist Roundtable have been Linda Stein, news editor with the Delaware Valley Journal, John Cole, reporter with the Pennsylvania Capital Star, and Christen Smith, regional editor for the Center Square. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
And I'm Phil Beckman. Thank you for watching.